Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another week of the Power Rankings. I am your host, MegaLugia. Unfortunately today, or fortunately, however you want to view it, we will not be joined by Turbo again as he is still on holiday in Italy. What a nice guy we have, but for real, so it'll be just me for the Power Rankings again. Hopefully next week he'll be back, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. So let's kick it off right from here. Starting in at number 12, we have Dench, coach of the Viridian Beedrills. Now Dench, my man, I feel sorry for you, dude. Tilt just does not seem to be going away for you, and especially coming up against a great opponent this weekend being Jolt. You just simply out-prepped. You said it yourself during the match. If you had Moonlight or Soft-Boiled on your Clefable instead of Wish, the match could have potentially turned out different because you always had to waste a turn going for Wish and then Protect, and in that turn Sylveon can just go for a Hyper Voice, could go for its own Wish. So it was a stall battle. Then unfortunately you could not win versus the Sylveon, and like you said, you didn't prep as well as you could for the Sylveon, especially when it was such a major threat to your team, dealing huge chunks of damage to your Clefable, even your especially defensive Meloetta, who couldn't do that much damage back to it, the Latios, which got obliterated, the Rotom as well. So if you prep better for the Sylveon, I think the match could have turned out bigger. And I keep mentioning the Sylveon because it was the downfall at the end of the game. It was the one that picked up 4 kills and kind of sweep the rest of the game. So I think maybe you need to look at your team and what you could bring potentially. You could have brought the Calm Mind Suicune, that could have been a thing, and play around with some Scald Burns maybe, and set up alongside it. Crocoon could have been an option. So I think you just need to look at your opponent's team as a whole and see what really places your team in danger and work from there. Unfortunately, you are last on the MPL this week, but I'm hoping that you bounce back, man, get some wins, get off that tilt, and hopefully we'll see you move up soon. Next up, coming in at number 11, we have the San Francisco 49ers. Last week we placed them last, and we mentioned in the MPL Power Rankings that we wanted him to move up, even though he got a win last week. In order for him to move up, we wanted to see him pick up some consistent wins, and now that is what we're talking about when we see consistent wins. Pick up a major victory against one of the top coaches in the MPL right now. It was a great match. Scarf Azelf, right? Yeah, Scarf Azelf was a really good bring, a good pivot, allowing him to gain some momentum and pick up some damage. He's really using Azelf well this season. I really like how he's using it. Azelf is usually not seen as a major quote-unquote threat in draft format, but he's making it play really well, and the whole way how he played the match was really well. He knew what he needed to keep for his end game, and if he just kept Azelf at the end, even though he missed one of his moves at the end, it still didn't matter, and he picked up the victory. So really good game there from the 49ers. Hopefully we see him keep picking up those wins and moving slowly up in the Power Rankings. And coming in at number 10, people, we have the Blackthorn Frogadiers, coached by Ayoku. So we are keeping him at number 10 this week because he played a very good game again against one of the top coaches that we have in the league right now, and it came down to a few unlucky plays working against him in the end, which cost him the win, but we'll go more over that in detail when we move on. But that's why we have him here at number 10, even though he lost this week. So the Frogs, they played really well. They do have 2 losses, but they were against 2 really great coaches in the league, and Ayoku played really well. He knew what he had to keep for the end game. He kept his setup sweepers. His Dragonite punched huge holes in Pat's team, especially with a D-Dance up, and he kept the Azumarill as well in the back. So he played everything well, right? There were a few questionable plays, but overall he made the smart, the safe, and the good plays. So he's in versus the Celebi, and he knew that gave him a good chance to get the D-Dance up. He kept going for it. He knew that he could set up on the Celebi, and then he proceeded to knock out the Celebi. It came down to the Tornadus then. It was his Azumarill, his Electivire, and his Dragonite versus the Tornadus. And from there, you expect him to pick up the win, right? But his Dragonite was confused. What happens versus the Tornadus? Instead of getting a clutch hit off and doing a big chunk of damage, he gets confused, and the Dragonite gets knocked out without picking up any damage. The Electivire comes in. If it was Scarfed, it could have done some damage, which is that is one thing I do have against his prep. I think if we brought the Scarf Electivire, it definitely could have put in some work, but then it gets knocked out by the Tornadus. Next, he has the Azumarill in, and this is, I think, where the game-changing point happened. So not only does the Tornadus land a Hurricane, but it gets a crit, and that crit mattered on the Azumarill. So I think that's a bit unfortunate. It cost him the game, but that's the game we play. Again, not taking anything away from the way he played really well. It's just unfortunate that the hacks went against him this week. So just, keep your head up, know that you played well, your prep is good as well. Maybe just consider a Scarf Electivire, and hopefully next week you'll pick up some wins. So that's why we have him here at number 10. And coming in at number 9, we have the Anastar Umbreons, coached by Mystic. Now, I can't really comment too much on this game because Mystic didn't upload his side of the battle, so I can't really get his perspective, but I will say a few things from what I saw from his opponent's side. So a few misplays I think happened because when the Empoleon went for agility, I think it really caught Mystic off guard, and he kind of panicked a little bit. For example, so the Empoleon was at +2 speed, right, but it was in versus the Vaporeon, and Empoleon didn't increase its offensive capability, so I don't really see the reason to switch out your Vaporeon, because if it did have Grass Knot, which it did, the most it could have really done was around 20 to 25%. Having said that, the Empoleon was burnt, so it was already getting whittled down. You could have just stayed in with the Vaporeon, go for some more Scald, some Wishes, do what Vaporeon does best and just stall it out. So I think he kind of panicked. Yes, he did get the Wish Heal on his Lopunny, but the Empoleon just outsped it and knocked it out anyway. It was a crit, so I'm not completely sure if that crit mattered. I'm not sure on his investment versus the Lopunny, but yeah, I think that was a bit of a misplay. And one other play, which I'll go into more detail when we talk about Asteroid side, is when your opponent's in versus a Vaporeon, you don't expect them to go for a water type move, right? Hence the water absorb on Vaporeon. But Asteroid was feeling ballsy this week. He went for it, and subsequently he lost his Landorus, so can't really blame him there. That was a very unique play, but like I said, can't comment too much, so that's why we have him here at number 9. At number 8, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Leeds Rhyhorn, and this was, I don't know, this was a very quick match. I didn't expect it to be over that quick. It mostly due to great prep on his opponent's part, but there were a few misplays that he made as well. So for example, he made a lot of safe plays during the game, right? He knew what he needed to do, and it paid off. But in the one instance that really caught me off guard is when he needed to make the safe play. Like, the safe play was obvious, he chose to go for a real head scratching play. It was an Emboar in versus the Scizor. Now, 10 times out of 10, we know that Emboar obliterates Mega Scizor. It can't have an item, it can't have the fire-reducing berry, so Flare Blitz is actually gonna knock it straight out. He chooses to go for a Swords Dance. Why? I'm not really sure. Maybe he expected the sub or something like that, but I think that was way too risky of a play, and it resultantly cost him the match because Scizor was a good mon against the rest of his team. So I think that was a bit of a misplay. You make the safe plays during the rest of the match, but when it comes to that one time you need to make it, it's not made. It was a good bringing the Ditto in versus the Golurk, because he knows, punch for punch, if you're scarfed, you can do a lot of damage with the Shadow Punch back. But that was good prep on his opponent's part, knowing the EV spread he needed to be able to potentially live that hit, so can't really blame him for that. So he made some good plays, but just questioning the Swords Dance on the Mega Scizor. And at number 7, we have the Chicago Chandelures, coached by Asteroid. Like I mentioned in the conversation with Mystic, Asteroid played a really good game. There were a few things I might have liked him, just to brush up on. Especially before you come into a match, you should know that what +2 speed means, right? You should know that it doubles your speed, not 1.5 or not 3 times, whatever he was saying. I was shaking my head. I was like, oh dude, please don't lose this game because you thought agility gets you up to +3. So that's one thing. It didn't really cost him too much in the match, but just know it for future reference. I'm sure you know it by now with all the comments and all that stuff. But really good game. Agility in Empoleon is not something you see too often. It's not crazy out of the blue, but it's not something you see often. You usually see it, Stealth Rocks, Defogs, that kind of stuff, and it really caught Mystic off guard. However, when he knew he was in versus the Vaporeon, he knew that Grass Knot wasn't going to do a ton of damage, so I think he should have calced it and just get in a clear, definitive answer, not playing a guessing game to know how much it's going to do, or at least wait till the Vaporeon is whittled down even more, or at least gone from the battle, and then get your Empoleon sweep. It was really good to see him get the crit on the Lopunny, knocking it straight out, also taking that 60% chance to flinch from the Jirachi and dealing some huge damage back. Really good plays there. And I have to mention Garchomp going for Aqua Tail versus the Vaporeon, expecting the Lando switch in on an Earthquake. Hands down, great play, man. That was amazing to see. Great ballsy play. It really paid off. It's good to see when you go for that ballsy play and it actually works out in the end. Having said that, if it didn't work out and the Vaporeon got even more health back, that was a tough situation to come back from, but that's a different story. So really good game there, and picking up another win and moving up in the power rankings. At number 6, we have the Detroit Liepardz, coached by Cypher. So Cypher's game, this was something that me and Turbo said last week, which he really needs to improve on. He needs a more solid defensive backbone for his team. He had the Milotic, Blake had a Raikou, and a number of other threats that could really put dents in his walls, quote unquote walls, being Gliscor and Milotic. So I think he really needs to maybe just look at the free agency and see what he can get for defensive options, because although his team is stacked offensively, when it comes up against a really offensive team or some really good prep as well, then he's kind of falling short. So he played a good game. He can't really, when you see a reducing berry on a Mon, especially a really tanky one like Skarmory, and you go for that hit and the berry reduces the damage, you should sometimes expect counter. I'm not saying it's the first thing that comes to your mind, but you should try and scout for it, because when I saw that berry pop, I was like, okay, Skarmory's coming. I mean, counter is coming on Skarmory, so that's one thing he should watch out for. Bringing Roar on the Volcanion was really nice, not allowing the Manaphy to set up a free sub on it. So that was some good brings, but like I said, a few misplays, like when he went for the Tail Glow on the Gliscor, he should have straight away went into Kyurem and then Bolt Strike on the Manaphy. That could have been a sequence of plays that changed the match. Instead he went into Volcanion, a bit more passive, a bit more safe. Maybe check it out for future weeks, but main thing I have is just look at your defensive backbones, maybe see how you can work around with the sets on your Mons and see what they can do. So that's why we have him here at number 6 this week. At number 5, we have the St. Louis Sableyes, coached by Dan. And Dan, you are finally picking up some wins. You were 0-4, you're now 2-4, slowly climbing back up. So let's see you continue to move up in the power rankings. But having said that, you played a really good game this week. You had some unique EV spreads, some unique sets, and you knew what you needed to do. You made the right safe play by going for a Flare Blitz versus the Scizor. So that was good to see. One play I do question is, you played kind of recklessly with your Weavile, and Weavile is always a really good Mon to have on any team, and you switch it in on a Scald versus the Seismitoad, praying for not a burn. So it is 30% chance, so it is in your favor, but it's a bit reckless. If Weavile got burned, it kind of would have been useless. And you said that you expected him to switch out the Seismitoad when you brought the Weavile in. I don't really see how Weavile scares out a Seismitoad, as knockoff or Icicle Crash max does around 50% or 45%, so bit of a questionable play there, but in the end it didn't really matter. Nice EV spread on the Golurk. You said you knew that you had more of a chance to live it than he does, so good prep there, and Golurk really put in some work, so nice to see a low tier Mon put in the work. Good to see you pick up some wins, and hope you see you back in the race for the playoffs. So we have him here at number 5. At number 4, we have the Baltimore Aries, coached by Dan, and Moxie prepped this week. He knew what he needed to do, and counter on Skarmory, great bring. Like I said, it's not completely out of the blue since Skarmory is a massively tanky physical wall, but you don't really see counter all too often because it is situational and you need to go for it when you expect your opponent to attack and not switch out, any of that stuff. But counter was a great bring, really good to see. I really like the Manaphy set. See, going for substitute, whenever I look at an opponent's team, I'm like, alright, what can I set up a substitute on? What's he immediately going to switch out when I bring in one of my huge threats? And he saw the Manaphy and he knew he can get up a sub versus a lot of his team. So that was really good to bring. Getting the Psychic off versus the Venusaur, the Volcanion in the end, just slowly chipping down his opponent's team. Really good bring. So good to see him bounce back and pick up some wins. He is obviously a really good player, and he was able to bring down a very offensive team this week in the Detroit Leopards. So GG to you, Blake. At number 3 this week, we have the Houston MegaHorns, coached by Aura. Aura dropped down 2 spots this week, and I'm sorry, man. It just it had to happen. We have a lot of tough competition, but you're still a good coach. I'm sure you know that. But we have him here at number 3 after his loss versus the San Francisco 49ers. In both mine and Turbo's opinion, he didn't prep well enough for a scarfed Azelf. Azelf is just such a diverse mon. It can do so many things. Like, it can bring sub, it can bring life orb, it can bring extra belt, scarf, whatever it may be. And I don't think he prepped enough for it, or didn't consider it to be enough of a threat. And in the end, he just got outplayed by it, and the prep wasn't enough. Lucario couldn't do enough damage in the end game. Lucario is one of those mons that if you get set up, with a Swords Dance or a Nasty Plot, it can do a ton of damage, especially with that priority E speed, but it isn't that hard of a hitter, and if you're not getting set up, then it's a bit underwhelming. So I think the Lucario didn't just do enough damage in the end game to kill it off. And maybe for about Pursuit on the T-Tar, that might have been a different game, trap the Azelf or whatever it may be. So bit 2020 hindsight, you can see what you could do for next week. But in the end, he lost a close game, a really back and forth game, and just hit after hit after hit. So we have him here at number 3. And at number 2, we have a bit of a difference here between me and Turbo. I have the Toronto Staraptors, while he has the Sin City Staraptors. So I'll go ahead and explain Turbo's point of view first. Turbo says it was another great win by Pat. He could have perhaps played for a higher differential once again, and that has made him slide this week behind Token. And also his win did rely on a roll due to perhaps being careless and unnecessary plays within the game. So that's the gist of what Turbo has to say. But what I have to say is, I don't have him at number 2. I'll explain that when we get to number 1. I have the Toronto Raptors, and the reason why I have the Toronto Raptors at number 2 instead of number 1 is because although Pat didn't play perfectly and his game at the end came down to a roll, he still didn't lose. So I can't move him down for that. It was a bit reckless, a bit reckless, and could have turned out differently a different week, but he still won, so I can't knock him down for that. So he's at number 1 for me. Toronto Raptors, man, you are just moving up. You are playing really well. Sylveon just put huge dents in Dench's team. The Hyper Voice, the Wish, he knew that he could take so many hits, and the leftovers, it was just a great bring. He seems to calculate every week meticulously what he needs with his EV spreads, with his team, and it just paid off this week again. I mean, in mine and Turbo's opinion, he was genuinely unlucky to not get a 6-0 this week, right? He played really aggressively, but he played well, right? Like turn 1 with the Thunders, and he was able to counter the Clefable perfectly, man. How often can you say that you can counter a Clef, right? And he just did it so well with the Sylveon. It was just a great game, so that's why I have him here at number 2. That's why I have him here at number 2, is because he's slowly moving up, but I couldn't put him in at the number 1 spot because Pat didn't lose this game. But I feel like it's gonna be a really tight race from now till the end of the season between 1, 2, and 3. So really good win there by Joe. And at number 1 for me, like I explained, I have the Sin City Staraptors. Now, Pat, like I said, you did not lose this game, so which is why I have you at number 1. But it was a bit of a risky game. Those plays where you had the Celebi in versus the Dragonite and all that, you kind of let the Dragonite get some free setup, and it was really risky, right? Like, if he didn't get that confusion at the end and then hit himself in the confusion versus the Tornadus, E-Speed could have done a ton of damage, and then, you had to rely on all your moves that you had to land had some accuracy drawbacks, like the Heat Wave versus the Electivire. Potentially if that was Scarf, then you would have lost the game. The Azumarill landing the Hurricane and getting the crit as mattered as well, since it was a roll to knock him out. So a bit recklessly, and your differential isn't great right now. You're picking up close wins, but I can't really blame you for that. Picking up another win, you played an overall good game, but if you didn't get a bit fortunate at the end, then Ioku's endgame vision and win checks in the back could have cost you. But you are here at number 1 again, so good luck to you, my man, and hopefully we see you pick up some wins in the next week as well. And there we have it, guys, week 7 of the MPL Power Rankings. Make sure to let me know what you thought in the comments below. Turbo was not here again, but like I said, hopefully that man is back next week. And until next time, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure to check out all the coaches and mine in the description down below. MegaLugia here, checking out. Peace!